Hello everyone, Sunderek here. So this is the pregame analysis for Sayu. Now of course, before every scene starts, the one thing I gotta mention is because of this passive where Sayu can catch crystal flies without them noticing, you should be at least going for one copy of Sayu. Now of course, if you have guaranteed and you do not want Yoimiya to ruin your guaranteed on the 50-50, then in that case I would advise do not pull on Yoimiya's banner. But otherwise, if you're on 50-50 or something, you should at least attempt 20 pulls or something just to see if you can get a copy of Sayu just for this passive or not. Now of course, with that said, let's get started into the actual pregame analysis. So of course, like my normal habit, conclusions first. So, Sayu is the best 4-star when it comes to world exploration so far in game. I'll explain this later why. Also, abyss-wise, she has high potential. Right now, looks like what she can do is one of the very consistent healers, and on top of that, she can use her E to swirl into specific element of her choice, which means she can pop shields, like she can act on top. She can act as a shield popping person on top of the shield popping person to basically speed up the shield popping process. However, if the abyss for the next patch is geared more towards healers and shield popping, then she is going to have a pretty high potential in the abyss. And also the last question I'll answer in the last section of this video is whether she should build EM or attack to boost her healing. Now of course, conclusions here, if you have her C6, then go for all 3 EM, so EM Goblet, EM Circlet, and EM Sands. Otherwise, if you have her C5 or lower, go for all attack Circlet, attack Goblet, and attack Sands. These 2 ways are the best for her just for healing. Now of course, if you're also talking about damage, then you probably need to do some other calculations. This is purely to maximize her ability as a healer. So with that said, a little bit about her lore. Sayu is the final puzzle to the piece of the full lolly team, of course. And the reason she is so short is actually because she just stopped growing at one point. As a result, she always wants to grow taller. And she also knows that sleeping helps her to grow, which is why she's always trying to spare time to sleep, which even means sneaking off work sometimes, which is why you always find her sleeping. And this is also the reason why she summons the Muji Daruma during her ultimate. It's so that she can make that thing does her work so she can sleep. That's essentially the reason why that whole thing was summoned during her ultimate. So that's all the lore about her. Let's go into the actual gameplay of her. Now of course, just a little bit of her stats at level 90. Not saying that you need to level her to level 90, but this is just some stats for comparison. So her attack is 244. It's the 18th among all the currently released characters. It is lower than 50% of the characters, of course, but still, assuming all the 5 stars are automatically put at the front of the list with exceptions like Zhongli or Hu Tao, who have absolutely very low attacks for obvious reasons. Other than that, Sayu, among the 4 stars at least, holds more than her own in terms of the attack. Now of course, that is also important because it is going to scale into her healing later on. 745 defense, nothing to talk about here, and almost 12k HP, nothing to talk about here. Ascension wise, she ascends with Elemental Mastery. Same as Sucrose at level 90, or at level 80 out of 90, she gets up to 96 Elemental Mastery. Compared to 115 from Kazuha, it's a little bit less, but again, she's a 4-star, so 96 is pretty good. Moving on to her auto attack really fast. For anyone that is looking into building Sayu into a DPS, this is not the right video for you, so if you're one of those people, you might not want to watch the rest of the video. But for the rest of you guys, her full 4-hit will hit a damage multiplier of 649.58%. Compare that with the very common 4-star DPS of Razor, who hits for a total of 745.59%. Again, both are at level 10. This means that she deals overall 13% less damage than Razor. Now, of course, 13% is not damage multiplier here. It's converting both those to actual damage numbers, and overall she deals, I believe, 13% less. So this means she is not good as a DPS, which is why we're not going to talk about her being a DPS. And on top of that, we do not know her actual attack speed for the full combo, so we also don't know her damage per second, which is the most important stats, because damage per second is actually determines what your damage output is, because you can have a very high damage multiplier but also taking a long time to finish that combo. Moving on to her elemental skill. Basically, her elemental skill turns her into a yo-yo. and she can roll around. She can change the direction of rolling as she is in this state, and when she exits this state, she will do a final kick, and that kick will deal additional AoE damage to nearby enemies. And on top of that, while she is in the yo-yo state, when she hits enemies, she will be able to do anemo damage to them. However, we're currently unsure how often she is able to do anemo damage. Like, can you just grind against the enemy and just do like damage over and over? We don't know if that's a possibility yet. And also, the other thing about this yo-yo state is that when she comes in contact with any element while in this state, she will be able to swirl that element. Now, of course, no Geo, because Geo is not swirlable. But when she swirls with this element, the entire yo-yo turns into that element. Basically means if you put Sayu near an area that is next to your body of water and you start pushing her E, then her entire E yo-yo state will turn into Hydro, which means at this point when she hits an enemy, also during her final kick when she deals the AoE, it will deal anemo damage. On top of that, it will deal additional Hydro damage because Hydro has been swirled. This is why she can use this to essentially forcefully adding an element into her swirl to help with shield popping during the Abyss. This is one of the reasons why she might be useful on top of a healer in the Abyss. Now moving on to her elemental burst. Sorry, one thing I missed about the elemental skill, she can swirl it for a max of 10 seconds as soon as she enters the state, and then the CD is based on the time she is in the yo-yo state. So if you just tap, it will have a 6-second CD, and if you hold for the entire 10 seconds, the CD only goes up to 11 seconds. So essentially you get rewarded for the longer you stay in this state. But it will have to depend on her damage. If her damage is not impressive, then it makes no sense to keep her in this state. And moving on to Elemental Burst. Elemental Burst does 6 ticks of damage in total with a duration of 12 seconds, which means 2 damage per second. 1 damage every 2 seconds, and on top of that, there are 6 ticks in total, so a total of 80 energy and 20 seconds cooldown. So the 6 ticks are actually kind of a little differently, because when casting, Sayu herself will heal nearby members and also doing AoE damage once. Now of course the healing here is scaled off Sayu's attack. Later we'll see some healing scaled off her elemental mastery, however we'll talk about that later. The reason I'm stating here is because this initial tick of the 6 ticks is done by Sayu, but after the initial tick, Sayu summons the Muji Daruma, who does the rest of the 5 ticks. So for the 12-second duration from 0 to 1.999 seconds, the tick is done by Sayu, and from 2 seconds all the way to 11.999 seconds, the tick are done by the Daruma. I'll just be referring to as Daruma for the rest of the video. Now regarding how the Daruma works for the rest 5 ticks, so depending on your constellation. For C0, if all nearby members' HP is above 70%, the Daruma will attack a nearby enemy instead. However, if one of the party members during co-op, if one of their HP is lower than 70%, or if you are in solo mode and your active character's HP is lower than 70%, Daruma will heal that party member instead. It will only heal one person at a time, at least for now. There is a passive for that later. And if there are no enemies nearby, even if everyone that's on the field, their HP is above 70%, but the Daruma will continue to heal you. So this is the section where it's nicer than Bennett's, because Bennett only heals up to 70. And finally, at C1, it ignores all these and just heals and deal damage at all times. Basically, the 70% restriction on dealing damage is completely removed. So at all HP, the Daruma will both heal a nearby party member and also deal damage to nearby enemy at the same time. As I've talked about before, this happens once every 2 seconds per tick and 6 ticks in total. Finally, moving on to her passive. So we've already talked about the Sayu's passive of attracting, of not disturbing wildlife. Basically, the wildlife section, other. If you go under the archive section, go under wildlife and the other section, then that is the list of animals that will not disturb when Sayu comes nearby. I'll talk about later why she is very useful in the world exploration, not only because of this, because she also has 4 other aspects that makes her really useful in world exploration. But the normal passives first. So passive number 1, when swirl is caused, heal nearby party members, including herself, for this is all nearby party members for 300 base HP, and on top of that, every elemental mastery converts to an additional 1.2 HP, and this can occur once every 2 seconds. This is where the EM scaling starts to come in. The other EM scaling is for C6, which basically reads when under the effect of her Q, Duruma will gain the following for every single elemental mastery: 0.2% more attack, achieving a maximum of 400%, and 3 more HP, achieving a maximum of 6k. Now, at C6, of course, this looks like if you stack Sayu with full elemental mastery, Duruma will be able to take full advantage of this, and on top of that, with this passive, Sayu will be able to heal some really nice damage and also deal some really nice numbers. However, without C6, without this 2 passive, this single EM healing is not enough to override the healing from her Q, which means of that, you should be using all attack instead. I'll show you actual numbers after at the end. So that is all she have for healing. Now let's talk about her second passive. When Duruma heals the party member, when Duruma heals the active character, or when she heals a character, she also heals the rest of the team. So if it's in co-op, then it's the rest of the entire team. If it's solo, then it's the rest of your squad by 20% of the amount that the active person that got healed just received. On top of that, this increases her range of the Duruma. Now, of course, the range of Duruma increases just a nice bonus range for AoE, but the healing on top kind of makes it better that she is now basically a team healer instead of just a single target healer, which seems to be less useful when it comes to healing. Because even the designated healer like Chi-Chi has her Q as the team healing ability and her E as her single target healing ability. And finally, I've already talked about this, but basically crystal flies will not be disturbed when Sayu comes nearby. So now let's move on to the section where I talk about why Sayu is so useful in world exploration. Basically, she is the queen for world exploration. Apart from the crystal flies thing, there is 4 more aspects, which is she is a Nemo, she is Claymore, she has a fast travel method, and on top of that, she is a healer. Anemo is good because double Anemo means more speed, the double Anemo resonance, and on top of that, Claymore is good for mining. And of course, if you have Zhongli, this is not a problem, but if you have Zhongli and you miss 1 crystal, you're not going to wait for 10 more seconds just to cast a second shield for that popping. So at this point, having a Claymore character is very useful. Now, of course, if you use Razor for farming, just pretend I didn't say this, because Razor himself is a Claymore. Fast travel is useful for faster travel, that makes sense. 10 seconds rolling, 11 seconds cooldown makes it very nice for her during travel, and especially during rolling you can also control the speed as normal. And finally, for healing, because sometimes you do run into mobs or you're mining or gathering ingredients and stuff like that, so HP loss is very common when you're doing world exploration, and having a designated healer on your team is very nice for world exploration, especially that Sayu has a consistent way of healing without really proccing her Q. She can heal just by causing swirl, which is very nice. And fun fact, you can cause swirls with certain you don't have to exactly cause swirls with enemies. Sometimes you can cause swirl with certain objects and stuff like that, and that can contribute to her healing hopefully as well. Now, of course, with that said, here is one theoretical best world exploration team which no one is probably ever going to use, but if you have all the characters, Sayu, Kazuha, Zhongli, and Aloy is probably so far the best team world exploration team. Now, Sayu, as I have explained before, the previous 4 abilities. Kazuha because of gliding, and then Kazuha can actually do damage if you turn into mobs. Zhongli can actually do damage as well if you run into mobs, and Zhongli can mine. And Aloy is there again to do a little bit of damage, but Aloy is good at catching boars and other animals without them flying away. So that's also very nice. Finally, back onto track, her constellations. So C1 and C6 we have already talked about, I'll just go over really fast. C1, basically she gets the same C1 Banana has. She can both heal and attack in her Q state at the same time. This is pretty nice. C2, the final kick of her E does more damage the longer he stays in her yo-yo state. So for every 0.5 seconds she is in her yo-yo/E state, it gains 3.3% damage bonus, which means if you do the full 10-second duration, we're looking at 66% damage increase. And for C4, it allows her to recover more energy. Basically, every single time Swirl is triggered, recover 1.2 energy particles, can occur once every 2 seconds. This triggers under the exact same condition and has the exact same cooldown as her first passive. This is basically a bonus to her first passive. Q can have 6 recharge times, which means we're looking at 14.4 energy particles for 100% energy recharge, and E can recharge, I believe, 6 times as well. If you count the initial, if you count the 5 and the final strike, then it's 6 times as well. Or 5 times, I didn't count exactly, but it's around the same number. So it's not a lot of energy recharge. Of course, you're probably still going to bring another person to do energy recharge, which is why Electro MC is so helpful, or the Raiden Shogun, because they're both in charge of charging like energy recharge for the entire team. But overall, I believe this adds a little bit nice that you can pop Q more often, because 80 cost energy recharge is still a big deal even if you bring a designated battery. And because she is a utility support, you're probably not bringing a battery specifically for her. So having this bonus is still pretty nice. And C6 we have already talked about. Under her Q state, Daruma can convert every single EM into 0.2% attack and 3 HP when it comes to dealing damage and healing. So it is pretty nice, and both achieve maximum when she is at 1200 EM, which is very hard to stack up to, so you can pretty much ignore that threshold, upward threshold. And of course, if you're lucky, then that's pretty good. So finally, here is the calculation for the different types of configuration between EM and attack. So as you can see in this configuration, that EM is doing most damage when she is under her when she is C6, and attack is doing most damage when she is under C5. Sorry, EM times 3 is doing most healing when she is under C6, and attack times 3 is doing most healing when she is C5 or lower. And of course, this is all assuming a level 90 Kazuha equipping, a level 90 Sayu equipping the new craftable Claymore with 4-piece Viridescent Veneer artifact set, and assuming there are no substats of the artifact set. So depending on going EM or Sans, EM or attack is still depending on your personal artifact and how you rolled. Now of course, this is theoretical best amount. Don't like farm a month straight just for that last single EM piece from the Viridescent Veneer set. If you have them from Sucrose and you got Sayu C6, just steal them from Sucrose. If you don't have them, attack still does fine. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. Thank you and have a nice day.